Let's go out on video chat now. Our good friend Justin Dunk joins us from 3downnation.com. JD, how are you, my friend?
I'm well, guys. I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of farm work and, let's say, the media laid-back lifestyle.
Well, give me one good farm story for you.
Oh, my goodness. There's so many, but I can recall when I was a kid, all the time my dad had to make sure that I was up on the weekends, and most of the time that would come after we played a high school football game the night before on Friday, went out, enjoyed the night, of course. So I remember one time there was a night that didn't really go so well, and I had to visit the porcelain throne a number of times because I was throwing up. And then the next morning, my dad made sure that my sorry ass got out of bed to do all of my farm chores. So that's one that always stuck out to me, that no matter what state you're in, you better be out there because the animals got to be fed.
Oh, I just shuddered thinking of the times that my dad would come into the bedroom and rip my comforter off. Get the hell out there. You wonder why I am the way that I am. Yeah. Okay, to football, Justin. What do you got today? Where do you want to start?
All right, guys. Well, I was going to hit you with two things. So first, we'll start with some breaking news. And you guys are so good to me that I literally want to have fresh stuff for the show all the time. So I've confirmed from multiple sources that the Toronto Argonauts went over the salary cap in 2019. Somewhat unimaginable because they were 4-14 and, you know, except for Ottawa, one of the worst teams in the league. So what actually happened is that Randy Ambrosie, and I'm awaiting a statement from the league right now, decided because of the COVID-19 pandemic not to fine the Argos for going over. But there were a lot of teams that I spoke to that said, hey, you need to make sure that that cap is enforced because it was put in to have competitive balance. So a lot of people around the league not happy with that decision that's been made.
That they're not being fined. Well, I'll be honest with you. Justin, we could go on for hours on this. Like, I thought it would be the Alouettes because Kavis Reed was fired for this, right? For circumventing the salary cap. So how, where do they fall into things? Or do they correct it all between Kavis being fired and the end of the season? What do you know about that?
Exactly. So from what I've been told, the Montreal Alouettes were salary cap compliant. The issue was with Kavis Reed giving out payments outside of the salary cap that weren't tracked. That's why people were talking about money in brown envelopes. And, we've all heard the stories from back in the day when there was no salary cap in the CFL. But that's why the Owls actually came in under the cap, is because it was under the table money.
Well, I appreciate you saving that breaking news for this, Justin, and then Clark's sending it out on all our channels, and you'll be doing the same on 3 Down. So there's that. Well, hey, you got to get your thoughts on Canada West.
Yeah.
And as an alum yourself, and OAUA and the Atlantic Conference as well on not playing in 2020. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I totally get it from a health perspective, and I had a good long conversation with OUA President Gord Grace this week about the decision. He said, first and foremost, they wanted to let the student athletes know what was going to happen in terms of the season, because in Ontario, at least, the student athletes had to pick their courses starting on Monday. So they went ahead and made a decision, contacted all of the health officials. They had some input from the medical doctors who work with Team Canada in terms of the Olympic team in our country. So they made a well thought out decision, and one that they felt overall was safe. There's a lot of disappointment, obviously, from the player standpoint and the coaches, but they really felt like the OUA did, and I think around USports and Canada West, as you mentioned, and the AUS as well, that it was the safest decision for their student athletes, and you really can't fault them for that.
JD, 3 pieces of news, sir, that I want your thoughts on here. We were talking about Jim Mullen before, talking about, teams potentially looking at non-conference games. I just saw another tweet from him that came in within the hour that teams are looking at potentially playing some spring ball that wouldn't go against eligibility years. And then also the thought of USports players going and playing in the Canadian Junior Football League, like the PFC or the BCFC. Any truth to any of this stuff?
You're right on the tail there, Dupont, as you should be. And I've heard that a number of players, especially at West, are considering going and playing in the Canadian Junior Football League, and that the PFC and the BCFC and the CGFL overall are going to have meetings this week to decide how is this all going to work, because there's going to be a number of guys, especially in their draft year, and one guy that's right there in the backyard where you guys are is Kyle Borsa. He needs to play. He needs to have fresh film, so it would make a lot of sense for him to make the jump to the Regina Thunder and get some tape under his belt. Of course, we all know what he did as a rookie there and how he has the speed, but CFL teams want to see fresh film. The other intriguing, and it's just a rumor right now that I've heard, are about the Philpott brothers at the University of Calgary, and they're looking at potential options to go to the CJFL. So some talented guys could end up in that league if they can play.
Would they just go for a year and then be able to come back?
Well, that's what needs to be figured out. And the other part to this, too, is that I've actually heard NCAA programs are looking at Canadian talents and saying, hey, can we get a guy that's in his draft year that needs to play that could come down and play at our program? You know, there's a number of high-caliber guys. Dupes, you know, Nelson Lacombo at Saskatchewan. The Calgary Dinos have a bunch of big offensive linemen that could probably go stateside and play right away. So that's something that still has to be figured out.
Justin, from a viewer, Paul Totsky, he is an Argos fan in the GTA. He says, Justin, could you see Trey Ford from Waterloo as a CFL quarterback?
Oh, man. You know, I have that bias being a former Canadian University quarterback myself. For Trey Ford to be seen as a CFL quarterback, he's going to have to put on some muscle. He's very slight right now, obviously has the dual threat abilities, but if he can put on some bulk and potentially find a way to play somewhere here in 2020 or before the 2021 draft rolls around, then it's possible. But it just makes it increasingly more difficult for Ford and a number of these other guys that there's not going to be a USports season, at least in 2020.
From a viewer, Wayne in Victoria says, it's crazy to make decisions on playing this year in early June, considering what's happening in the USA. You'll have to, Wayne, explain that to me, because, again, they're playing Korean baseball. There are other leagues and organizations that are playing. If you can be strictly in Canada, why would what's going on in the States affect you at all? The border's closed. If that doesn't affect you, why couldn't you play? And that's what the university teams are saying, and junior football for that matter, too. By the way, our comment wall is going insane, Justin, about the Argos not being fined for going over the cap. They're very upset. Is that what the other teams in the CFL, is that what you're sensing, that they're very upset that the Argos aren't being fined for this?
Definitely, because they're saying, hey, well, if you're not going to find the Argos because of the coronavirus pandemic, which didn't take place in 2019, then what's to say we couldn't spend over the cap if hypothetically there is a season in 2020, because we know that we're not going to get fined, because we could point to the fact that Ambrosi decided not to fine them before the pandemic even started. So it could create a little bit of chaos here. Like, what's to stop somebody from going out and signing Darrell Walker right now for $200,000, maybe going over the cap by a few $100,000, if you got a legitimate shot at a Grey Cup and an 8-game season potentially?
Dun, dun, dun. Like sands through the hourglass. These are the days of our lives. Can you get the comment from Lynn? She's a good friend of mine. And put it up on the screen, guys, before we continue with Justin here. Because I honestly think, as far as Randy Ambrosi is concerned, there it is from Lynn, give other Canadian CIS players a chance that are fantastic and never got drafted if American players can't come up. I've been long saying that. And for that matter, global players that can't get into Canada either, give those Canadian university players an opportunity to play in the CFL. I love the notion. But as far as the other teams complaining about the Argos not being fined, I totally get it. But Randy will just block out the noise. He has to. I mean, it's similar to those GMs wanting to move the draft back. NFL GMs wanted to move the draft back too. Football guys rarely get their way, Justin. The business guys almost always do. Would you agree or disagree?
It does seem that way. Although I think the football guys have a point here, though. And even though you're fining them, the money's still staying within the league. It still goes to the league office. It's just on the team. So they're saying now, well, what's the point of having the salary cap? What's the point of having Trevor Hardy go around and do all the audits on the budgets to ensure that they're cap compliant? That it throws off the competitive balance. I'm with you. Oftentimes it's the owners and the commissioner, especially in the CFL, that have the last say and make the ultimate decision. And clearly what happened here. But you need to ensure that your competitiveness is balanced across the league.
Wow, I love it. By the way, Jason in Red Deer writes in. He says, "Hey guys, I'm late to the show. Have you got Justin's thoughts on the question of Colin Kaepernick coming to the CFL?" No. What do you think about that? I saw you voted in favor. You'd like to see him in the CFL. What are your thoughts on if we would ever see him?
I really would. And funny you ask, because that was number 2 that I was going to get to, because Colin Kaepernick's CFL rights has actually changed hands now. He was for a while on the Montreal Alouettes negotiation list, but he's gone back to the team that initially put him on. Currently, he is property of I'll give you guys one guess.
Hamilton Tiger Cats, our favorite team.
Bing, bing, bing. You're a winner, Roddy. Come on down for your prize. And I really think if you look at what the Ticats did with Johnny Manziel, nobody ever thought that was going to happen. Now, from Kaepernick's standpoint, it's totally different because he is seen as a major influencer in the Black Lives Matter movement, as he should be. But for him to play in a league, if it's the CFL, I think could help him on that platform that say, hey, I'm in a league that accepts me, that will allow me to play based on my talents and not the color of my skin.
Dupont, get your nose out of the phone, because he's not paying attention. We had this. Look at you're all upset.
But I am paying attention.
I know you are. I'm just throwing you under the bus.
I know.
You don't agree. Justin and I are saying the same thing. You don't agree. So tell him, please, why you don't agree.
I just don't think it's a smart branding play. I mean, when was the Baltimore-San Francisco Super Bowl? I mean, that
2013.
was 2013. That was years ago. And that's when he was at his best. I mean, if he comes to the Canadian Football League and doesn't play well, it's going to tarnish his brand. And right now, it's never been higher. So, but you're a football player, Justin, so I kind of have to take what you say a little bit, because if you don't take that shot, can he live with himself? So as a football player, will he say, you know what, I've done the movement, I've done the influencing thing, I can go play football and show people that I can play? Or does he continue on the movement? I don't know. I mean, he can do both, but if he comes to the Canadian Football League and doesn't play well, I don't think that's great for his brand.
That's a good point, dude, because you look at what happened with Johnny Manziel. Everyone thought he was going to come up here, including himself, and just rip the league apart. And people would have that same thought with Kaepernick. So American players have to weigh that, especially Kaepernick. He's not doing it for the money. If he came up here, he's playing for the love of the game and just to get another shot to play quarterback. So would it be worth him the opportunity to come up here and play? Maybe he really just has everything to lose, in a sense, from a football playing perspective. But I just think it could potentially be such a benefit, obviously, for the league, but for Kaepernick's brand, that he's in a league who accepts him, where the NFL clearly wouldn't.
Well, things change. I mean, I would say this. Did you get into this game to be a player, or did you get into this game to be an influencer, Colin? And I don't think we'll see him, because at this stage of the game, I think he might want to be an influencer. You kind of convinced me of that. I didn't ever think he was going to come to the CFL in the first place. I hope that he does, for the reasons you outlined. I guess lastly, bad news today that bad news for the CFL perspective, that the border closure has been extended to the end of July. Justin, that's, I think, terrible news for the Canadian Football League. What is your take on quarantine cities and that kind of thing? And if we will see CFL football in 2020?
Well, I've sort of been a little cautiously optimistic the last couple of weeks, and that's kind of remained there. I still think, it's potentially a long shot, but from what I've heard, it's been pretty realistically laid out to the players in terms of what they're going to have to do in this scenario. And there's really 3 main ways that the league is talking about right now that they could potentially play. That's 1, complete hub city that has every CFL team. 2 hub cities, Regina and Winnipeg, has been talked about a lot, and the adopted team model. The tricky part with the adopted team model is that you still have a lot of travel costs and just logistics in terms of getting in and out of cities. If you went to Winnipeg and Regina, from what I've heard, the idea could be, and it would save you money as well, that you just play those teams that are in your city. So the Bombers go back to the East Division just for 2020, and you have 5 teams there, so you play all of them twice. That's 8 games. And then in Regina, the West teams that are there play each other, obviously, a couple or 3 times to get to that 8-game number, and then you figure it out for the playoffs. But at least you're not shuffling back and forth. That way you save money in terms of travel costs, also testing, because you can keep guys essentially in the bubble. And the players understand that they play an 8-game season, or at least what's been laid out to them, that they're going to come up here and play for half of their salary. That's what's been presented by the league. But I still think that's the biggest hurdle because there are a number of players out there, especially the upper echelon earners, that have already got a big chunk of their signing bonus. So are they willing to come up here and play for next to nothing because they have a bunch of money in their pockets and risk their careers and potential football playing futures just for 8 games? Big question to be decided.
Justin, this has been your best hit ever. Thank you so much. All of the info will be at 3downnation.com, your number one source for CFL information. Thank you, sir. And let's do it again sooner than later.
You bet, boys. High bar, but we'll keep raising it.
Yeah, exactly. Good job. Justin Dunk with breaking news today. It was the Argos that were the only team that broke the salary cap in 2019, and they're not going to be fined. What are you looking at me?
Who would have thought, right?
I didn't have them in the pool.
No, me either.
Who pooped in the pool? It was the Argos.
Yeah.
Should have known. We'll talk about that in hour 2. A lot of it. Braden Lenius of the Rough Riders will be joining us, and Matt Hetherington from the Drive the Green Golf Podcast. It's the RP Show. Canada's morning sports talk show continues after this brief pause. Facebook Live, Game Plus TV Network, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Stitcher, and Spotify. And listen live at rodpeterson.com.
Hey, Rod Squad, now you can join the team with your very own RP Show gear. Head to rodpetersonshop.com and get yours today while supplies last. It's just like we wear on the show, official RP Show gear at rodpetersonshop.com.